Hi, welcome to the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. My name is Con Carbanho-Tidis. I'm the CEO and founder of the centre.
Jana and Saaj, welcome to the Impact Leaders Series. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us.
No, the pleasure is ours. You know, this is a series that we imagined because we wanted to really bring to life the extraordinary work that you do in the NGOs and in the incredible organizations where you work, in this case, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. I must admit, I'm particularly passionate about your work and the centre. I remember I was fortunate enough to be invited by Con to join a small group of people to see the centre in Fitzroy when it was only just being built. And it was a shell of a place. I think we're talking almost 10 years ago now. And of course, my family came also as migrants from effectively not technically refugee status, and that's perhaps something we can touch on today, in 1939, fleeing Eastern Europe. And so I'm sure we're excited to learn from you today around, you know, the lived reality for so many people in Australia. And also let us not forget that Australia would not be what it is today, the vibrant multicultural community, without the extraordinary influence and cultural milieu and food and languages and wisdom of our infant, migrant and asylum seeker populations. So I think if we could just kick off and ask, what does ASRC do? You know, for most people living in Australia, it's you know, life bumbles along as it does for all of us without understanding the extraordinary work that you do and the services that you provide to facilitate that entry point for a lot of people looking to settle in Australia.
Thanks, Jeremy. I might kick off with this one. My name's Jana. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Campaigns at the ASRC. I'm working from home today. I'm on Wurundjeri land here today, and ASRC has two centres in Melbourne, one in Footscray on Bunurong land and another one in Dandenong, also on Wurundjeri land. So just want to acknowledge the lands that I'm on today. I've been at ASRC for 13 years, so have been there for quite a while and see how much the organisation has changed, as you all would have seen from that very short video that celebrated our 20th year anniversary 2 years ago. We've been around for 22 years, and ASRC really started with a philosophy that has continued through to this day, which is to provide services and to assist people seeking asylum while their rights are being denied when they're in Australia. So we're currently supporting about 7,000 people seeking asylum, predominantly who are in the community in Victoria, and also some people who are in detention, either in Australia or also offshore on Nauru or Papua New Guinea. So we provide a whole range of services, everything from a fortnightly community food program so people can come in and access food, through to legal support, to housing and homelessness services, to education, employment services, any services that people need to navigate and access while they're in Australia. Because something that a lot of people probably don't realise is that people seeking asylum are one of the only groups in our country who can't access any mainstream social support. And because of the nature of their visa, they might not be able to work. They might not have the right to work on their visa, so they can't earn a living, but they also can't access mainstream social support. So as you can imagine, if you can't work, you're not allowed to work, you can't access any mainstream social support. How are you supposed to be able to survive? And that's where charities such as ASRC step in. The area that I work in, and Saaj is part of this team as well, is advocacy, because while we have grown over the past 20 years to provide support to 7,000 people, and that is true testament of the community, because we do not accept any federal government funding, because we only exist because of policy gaps in federal government. So we are completely funded and supported through thousands of volunteers, the community, which is an incredible success story. It is a pity that we have to be so big, because it just shows how much the rights of people seeking asylum in our community are denied. And I think a lot of people don't really necessarily recognise that, of the thousands of people seeking asylum, especially in Victoria and also nationally, who don't have access to their rights. So while we provide those services directly, we have a health clinic, we have community food program, we also advocate for change, because eventually we don't want to exist as an organisation. If people seeking asylum's rights were upheld, they were treated fairly, then we wouldn't have to exist. And that's really the goal and what we want to get to.
And Saaj, what inspired you to work with ASRC? I understand you also have a lived experience in this space. Could you share with us that and your experiences?
Yes, certainly. Yeah. First of all, thank you for having us in your webinar. And I would also like to acknowledge that I am speaking from Wurundjeri land of Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. This land was never ceded. It always will be an Aboriginal land. I myself, as I mentioned just earlier to yourself, Jeremy, am a person with lived experience, and I did seek asylum in Australia about 12 years ago, but I'm only just over a year old within the ASRC, but I don't feel it that way. I feel like I have been part of this mission, part of this movement forever, because I am really passionate and about overall human rights or rights of human beings. But since coming to Australia, my vision kind of changed, and my focus to human rights changed to the rights of refugees, because I did not know how people struggle when they go to a new country. And when I went through this process myself, only then I realized the limitations, the obstacles, the helplessness. And, when you are put in a situation where your recognition is taken away from you, that gave me a new vision to work on. And I thought this is the best place to start with. So I was always looking, while settling in, to find a platform where I can operate, where I can raise my voice, where I can advocate for other people, or thousands of other people who are going through the same journey that I went through. So it took me quite a long time, starting from scratch, being no one in this country, as I filed my asylum application here in Australia, to becoming someone. So it took me, let's say, roughly 11 years to be able to find my feet and to find my platform, such as being a person working in the ASRC, to be able to do that. So it's not a job or a work that I would do for earning money or as a source of income. For me, this is a mission. For me, this is a movement. For me, this is a family. For me, as our video mentioned as well, a home for hope. Mm-hmm. Not only for me, but so many other thousands of people, as Jana mentioned, that we are helping, thousands of people with food, shelter, with legal assistance, with help, with everything. So that's what I wanted to do. And that's what motivated me to come to ASRC and be able to operate with a family within this organization, to join the family and work for others, to help them through safely go through this situation and be able to become someone that they want to be, and have that life that they had ever dreamed of. So this is my mission, and this is my objective of being here. I mean, it's beyond just being a Victorian organiser within the ASRC. It is just being a human fellow to other thousands of people that share the same experience like myself. And this organization, ASRC, is the best place for that. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Saaj, and thank you, Jana, for sharing that. It's I did not realize myself how hard it is to migrate to this country. I had a friend several years ago from Colombia who was a judge in her country. Her parents are lawyers, highly educated, and she was unable to migrate here, even though she was fleeing threats of her life from the FARC at the time, the guerrilla army. And so it strikes me as extraordinary how most Australians, simply because it's their lived experience, we don't appreciate often not only how incredible this country is and what it offers us, but how hard it is to move here from a country less fortunate. Could you perhaps share, Jana, if I could just ask you this for a moment, or actually, Saaj, perhaps given that it seems that this is more your lived experience, just share. I think it'd be really interesting for people to understand how difficult it is to migrate here and to receive that legal status.
Look, as you just mentioned, what an incredible country it is. That's what I thought before coming to Australia. Was my dream to escape conflict and war and instability and uncertainty from my own country. I'm originally from Afghanistan, so that's what my dream was, to flee to a safe place. And that safe place at that time, my option was Australia. I was looking forward to that, to reach to that safe place. When you are struggling and you are lost in the ocean, all you are looking for is a boat to hang on to and to be able to climb on and start, breathing again. So for me, this land was a place like that. I was looking forward to it, and it took me years to make my way here and be able to step into this beautiful country. But then what it means for you to migrate from your homeland to another place, as in the process I realized, and I just shed a brief light earlier in my comments as well, is that you become no one. You have to be ready for that. And I was not. And I thought it is a first world country. It is a country that has everything and has everything to offer to everyone. But that was not true when I came in here. That was not true. And my rights as a person was stripped away from me when I became a refugee, or while my case was pending, at least, which goes for quite a few years. You don't have the right to study. In most cases, you don't have the right to work. You don't have Medicare card. You can't access health services. You don't have child minding allowance or support from the government. And when I was doing it at one point, when I was I had no choice but to put my baby in daycare, I had to pay $75 per day for his care. So while having no income at all and coming from a conflict zone where the currency is zero compared to $1 here in Australia, it is really hard. It was really hard. It took me to a lot of debt as well when I was doing it. So we go through that. Not only that, that's the financial side of it. As a person, you lose your experiences, you lose your academic achievements. You are not recognized as someone who did work in their country, such as I did. I had bachelor's degree from another country, and I had work experience within United Nations back in Afghanistan. Nothing was accepted, nothing was considered. You just wait until you gain your rights just as a normal or permanent resident, as a normal citizen or a permanent resident here in this country. Once you have those documents in hand after so many years, then you can apply again for studies, for work, and no one knows your work, no one knows your background. It is not recognized. So you start from zero. And
you start again.
Have a lot of people, who.
So can I just ask, how long was that whole process?
The whole process, such as for me getting into uni to start my studies while having another bachelor's degree, took me 8 years to get into university. So that's how long I waited for, just to be considered in a university for another bachelor's degree, not even a higher degree, just another bachelor's degree. It took me whole 8 years to do that, like that.
It's an extraordinary and such an important point. People come to this country so highly qualified, and yet there is so little that the government recognises as transferable skills, even though they are transferable skills. The human body being the human body, the mind being the mind, whether people work in the hard sciences. It's such a shame because there's so many lost skills that could be applied as gifts to the community, and obviously enabling people while they go through that process to earn a livable wage. Jana, can I ask you what inspired you to work in this space? What we find is that, and of course there's so much commitment and passion already being shared here, given the nature of this incredible topic. There is, part of why we wanted to bring this series to life was to really share the backgrounds of the incredible people working in this sector. And it seems that for all of us, there was a moment or series of moments that left an indelible mark where we felt compelled that we had to work in this space. Can I ask for you, Jana, what was it? What did you see, or what touched you, or what happened that perhaps left you with no choice but to work in this sector?
Well, for me, it was something that happened when I was a child. My father's Italian, my mum's Australian, and they met in the 70s traveling through Afghanistan and Pakistan. So just bear with me, I'll take you back a few decades, but that's where it all started for me. And my father was a journalist in Italy. So they fell in love, they got married in Italy and then moved to Australia, had 3 young kids. And then when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in the late 70s and early 80s, it was a war and persecution of people that really didn't capture the world's attention. So Dad, as a journalist with a love for the people from Afghanistan and a real sense of social justice and being a journalist, wanted to put a spotlight on what was happening in Afghanistan. So over 2 years in the early 80s, he flew back and forwards between Australia and Afghanistan trying to document exactly what was happening and we tried to get the first ever live satellite feed from Afghanistan to the world to show what was happening. And so he was making a documentary, and on the last day of filming, he was killed as a journalist in the documentary. So Mum decided to take 3 kids under 8 years old into Afghanistan to finish that film. So as a 6-year-old, we went to Afghanistan. There was the war zone there, so we went into Pakistan. And then the only way that we could actually get into Afghanistan was being smuggled in the back of an ambulance that had been captured to get us across into a war zone. And so I vividly remember this. I remember being in a refugee camp not long after we arrived in Pakistan. And we arrived, we were 3 very blonde, very white kids. And when we got to the refugee camp, the other kids saw me and they screamed and ran away because the only other blonde people they had seen were Russians, and the Russians were targeting and killing people from Afghanistan. Like, they would drop these bombs that were shaped as toys to intentionally harm and kill people. So I recognized from a really young age that people can hurt other people. They can persecute other people for nothing other than how they look. My mum actually ended up dyeing her hair black and rubbing dirt in our skin so that we wouldn't scare people. And I think I've carried that with me my whole life. Like, we stayed in Pakistan and Afghanistan for a number of months, came back to Australia. My mum finished the documentary and then it ended up winning quite a few prizes and awards. So we travelled around the world with that documentary. And that really, as a 6-year-old, opened my eyes to just understanding that there was persecution and it was caused by other people. So I've always really carried that through with me and had a very strong sense of social justice when I finished uni. And I did a lot of volunteering work, but I have a communications background and politics background is what I studied, and it was quite hard to break into the NGO world. So I lived overseas for a number of years and then saw the job opening at ASRC 13 years ago, applied for it, and have been there ever since. So I think, I'm lucky. I have Australian citizenship. I have Italian citizenship. I have 2 citizenships. I'm recognised in 2 countries. A lot of people, especially refugees, don't have that privilege or entitlement that I have. And so I've always wanted to be able to use my voice and my position, not only to create a place and space for others, but also to do whatever I could in my power to try and ensure that everyone's treated equally. And ASRC has been the place for me to do that. So sorry, it's quite a long answer, but it's a bit of history, just of that really personal connection that I have and what I witnessed as a child that I've continued to carry with me.
Thanks for sharing that, Jana. What an extraordinary story. Yeah, I about almost 4 years ago, I was in the Rohingya refugee camp, who are a stateless people and quote unquote one of the least wanted people on the planet. They just don't have a home anywhere, and not only to hear the stories of what they had survived, but the fact that you don't belong anywhere is something that most of us can't imagine. Jana, as Director of Advocacy and Campaigns, and from a systemic perspective, what would you say makes ASR unique in respect to its focus, its methodology, and the way that it's tackling the complexity of the issues that are impacting refugees and asylum seekers in this country?
I think that there are a couple of things that make us unique. First and foremost is that we don't accept any federal government funding. So we are in a position where we can respond to what people seeking asylum and refugees are telling us are the biggest areas and priorities to advocate for.
And sorry, can you just explain why you don't accept it and what that enables?
Yeah, so federal government funding is obviously a great way for organisations to be sustainable because they can get money to deliver services, but we really believe that we only exist because of gaps in what people seeking asylum can access within their community. When we talk about rights being denied, we mean things such as taking 8 years to get refugee status, taking 8 years to be able to get recognition of a degree that you've already been qualified for previously, not having the right to work. Really, that invisibleness that Saaj captured so beautifully is that your identity is stripped away. I mean, seeking asylum is a point in someone's life. It's not what defines them, but the way that our systems have been set up in Australia, it's absolutely stacked against people seeking asylum. And so we've forced them as a country to become invisible because of our laws and policies. So we want to challenge those laws and policies and really feel the only way we can do that is being completely independent of any government funding. So we can say what we want and not be worried about maybe we'll lose our funding, maybe we'll unintentionally insult someone. It means we can be totally non-partisan. So it doesn't matter which party forms the government. We can just always speak to the policies and be truly authentic in that way. And we really are unique as an organisation in doing that. So having that independence from any federal government funding allows us to speak out and speak up whenever we need to, and also to compliment when things go well, but without sort of being aligned to any political party. So that's probably one area that's unique. Secondly is that because we deliver those services on the ground, we can see straight away what's happening and where those gaps are, so we can speak from experience and expertise. And all of our service delivery is what informs our policies and our gaps. We see on an individual level what people aren't getting and then able to think, okay, this is systemic. It's not just one or two people. It's much broader than that. And we also make sure we're really, really dedicated to people seeking asylum and people with lived experience being front and centre of all our advocacy. So last year we did a huge project where we spoke to people seeking asylum and refugees and said to them, what are the biggest policy changes that make a difference in your life? It's one thing for me to say, oh, this looks terrible and that looks terrible, but I haven't lived through it. I haven't got that lived experience. So I don't know what's most important. So people seeking asylum and refugees saying, these are the most important areas that need to change. And then us being able to advocate for those areas alongside refugees and people seeking asylum. I think that's another area that really does make us unique, and being just really, really fearless. And it is hard to constantly be agitating and advocating, but we have to be, because even in the 13 years I've been there, things haven't moved enough. I mean, we're bigger now than we ever were. I mean, that just shows how much policy has failed people, and it's a devastating impact on someone's life.
So in the 13 years you've been at the organisation, has there been any meaningful systemic change, or is this issue just so mired in politics that it's seemingly impossible that the kinds of changes that would actually make a meaningful difference to those seeking asylum could actually occur?
There has been some.
Are you hopeful or
doomsday? But look, unfortunately, politics is what dictates this policy. And, they say politics poisons policy. And if ever you want to see it, it's in refugee policy. So have we moved enough? No, but there have been some small wins. And under both parties, which actually really shows not only the power of refugee advocacy and resilience, but also the power of the community. Like if we have a look, I mean, just today we've seen in The Guardian reporting that we're hoping that all refugees who are trapped on Nauru, who were exiled there 10 years ago, that number is expected to be 0 by the end of June. I mean, that is huge when you've still got both major political parties saying we'll maintain offshore processing, for there to be a recognition that most people there have been transferred to Australia or resettled somewhere else is a huge win. With the Albanese government being elected last year, there have also been some really positive changes, in particular that Australia is the only country that when people seek safety, if they're found to be a refugee, they're only given temporary protection status, and that's sort of no longer the case. And that's a huge systemic change, because it means for 20,000 people who are living in limbo for 10 years, they can now get on and build their lives with certainty. So there have been definitely some changes. It's just that consultation that I talked about what would make a difference in people's lives, when we did that, we came back with 60 pages of things that need to change. That is just how rotten the system is, and how much people seeking asylum have been demonised and their rights stripped away. So yes, there have been some wins. Does there need to be more? Absolutely. But probably, the biggest areas where we've seen reform have been around detention, onshore and offshore, and rights that people can access. Like even, for example, in Victoria, some of the large advocacy we did is that if you're someone seeking asylum, you don't have access to Medicare. But if you turn up to a public emergency hospital, you can get seen even if you're seeking asylum. So there have definitely been some wins over the years, which is what keeps us going and keeps the hope alive, but there's still a long way to go.
What we largely are not yet aware of is, the enormity of this issue globally. I was at an event recently where the High Commissioner for Refugees from UNHCR was speaking about, that there are now, more refugees, more people on the move than ever. So over 100 million people who are either have been forced from their home or internally displaced. And what this means for the outflows of people crossing borders. Obviously, this is expected to be exacerbated by climate change, which will also have its impact further conflict. So it's really incredible to meet you both and hear directly from those, working on the ground, locally here in Victoria, in Melbourne. So this issue is only going to become more complex, more urgent. Saaj, how would you rate Australia's response? I mean, you have a lived experience of the system, as it were. It sounds like it was not, a very lengthy process. In the time that you have been with the organisation, do you also see, in terms of your experience, a sense of change that for the people coming from the developing world or fleeing conflict, they perhaps won't have to live through the lengthy process that you did, but have a quote unquote better experience of being accepted as an Australian citizen, or at least having the same rights and access to Medicare and education, etc.
Look, mind you that I came during the good times. So I'm someone who came during the time when there were no policies passed for granting people temporary protection visas. There were no policies at that time to move people to offshore detention centres, and that they will never be able to step in Australia. So I came during quite smooth times, I would say. I only waited for my permanent residency for 2 years, and then another 4 years to get my citizenship, until I was fully an Australian citizen and have access to all the rights and services that any Australian enjoys in this beautiful, apparently from the outside, perfect first world country. So I'm someone who came during the easy times, but then after that, and especially since I have been working with the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, things have changed for worse. People are sent to offshore detention centres. Thousands of people, lived in this country on temporary protection visas while being recognised as refugees and had the right to seek asylum to another country, but still they had to keep renewing their visas. They had to keep putting the same information over and over again and being asked for some kind of documents that we don't even have access to, coming from a war zone, coming from a torn country, a broken system. We don't have those documents, and cases have been rejected because of lack of information, and it could not meet the criteria because we haven't come from the system where we have all these things in hand. If we had it, we would not become refugees here. So thousands of people are still living on temporary protection visas, although there have been announcements that they will be, provided permanent residency in Australia soon. The process has been slow, but we have another about 10,000 people who are still in limbo, who have been living in Australia for 10 years or more without any outcome of their application, rejected from everywhere, but they don't know where to go and still waiting, still in limbo. Families are apart. People are going through severe mental health issues, being apart from their families, from their children. Their children have grown up, their siblings, their first family members have died. They couldn't see them, for so many years. So yeah, things are really, really bad for refugees here in Australia. It's even worse compared to my time. But what we are hoping and what we are striving and what we are standing for is better change, for sure. There is much more need of organizations like ASRC now than ever, because unfortunately with the passage of time, we have proved that our policies are becoming more cruel and our practices in treating refugees have worsened over the years, which is really, really sad and disappointing. I mean, how Australia look from the outside is not really the same from the inside, particularly for refugees and people seeking asylum. And I am, with my lived experience, sure that a major population of Australian society is so unaware of that. And they just know this perfect system that they have grown up in, that they have enjoyed everything, and that there is a structure, and they just rely on whatever media releases and whatever, government portrays of refugees. So we stand and we strive for changing that narrative and, spreading the word and raising this awareness of just an ordinary individual within the Australian society, that such is not the case. This is what we are doing to thousands of people that, major population is not even aware of.
And the ignorance with which a small group of Australians respond to this issue is predicated on them forgetting also where they came from. I mean, unless you're a First Nations people, we're all beneficiaries of a system that has been built over a very short period of time that favours a small group of people. And I remember being it was such an honour at a UNHCR lunch where there was an Iranian gentleman who was he was a surgeon back home, and after many years got recognised, and now he's one of the leading orthopedic surgeons in this country. And him wanting to remind everyone in the audience by saying, people don't leave their home country unless they have to. Even if it's a difficult developing world scenario, that's their community, that's their home, that's their language, that's their culture, that's their food. People almost never leave their home unless they absolutely have to. So this sort of small-minded narrative that a small group of people have, or a small minority of people have, that somehow refugees are looking to benefit from this country without asking genuinely the question, what is your experience and from where do you come? And it's extraordinary how quickly we forget where we all come from. Thank you for both of you so much for sharing that. We've been passionate about this issue for many years at I Equal Change, and one of our early partnerships was with the ASRC. And we're so proud to have raised over $174,000 and counting from our retail and business partners that are giving back from every sale. Jana, could I perhaps ask you, the funding like this for the organisation, I mean, I know it's a drop in the ocean, but it's a meaningful drop in the ocean to the work that you do. I've been to the centre a number of times, and I would strongly encourage anyone to, if they can, to go and visit. It's a place of colour and vibrance and language and food, and it's a very lively place. How is this impacting people's lives on the ground?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And I know, $174,000. I mean, yes, it sounds like a lot, but you said it's, a drop in the ocean, but it's exactly what we need at ASRC. As I mentioned, because we are independent of federal government funding, we can only keep our doors open because of generosity of individuals and businesses and organisations. And so just to give an example, like when I mentioned we have a community food program. So because people seeking asylum a lot can't work and aren't able to work, we have a grocery store that we give that people can move through every fortnight to get fortnightly groceries. And we're currently supporting about 1,700 people through that fortnightly groceries. That includes families with children. So our budget, we spend $70,000 per month just on providing fortnightly groceries to people who otherwise, the vast majority, have no income at all. And that's exactly where the donations go to. It's the same with our health program. The majority of people who access our health program do not have any Medicare. Now, I know that sounds so hard to believe, but Medicare is something we all take for granted. I mean, especially during COVID times, we could see a doctor when we wanted, we could get a vaccination when we wanted. But if you're seeking asylum, you don't have the right to work, it means you also can't access Medicare. So you can't see a doctor without that private amount. I think it's about $80 or $90 per doctor visit. So that's also where the money goes to us. And then we provide pharmaceuticals. We've got people with kids who've got asthma that can't get asthma medication unless they visit the ASRC medical clinic. You've also got our lawyers, as Saaj mentioned, that she sees herself as one of the lucky ones, that it only took 2 years. At the moment, we've got some people who are still, after 10 years of being in Australia, haven't had their first interview for their asylum claim. So they're in limbo that whole time. So our lawyers are there to walk side by side with people to put in their protection claims. So money goes towards paying for our lawyers to put in protection claims for people, because once you're found to be a refugee and then you can get permanency in that pathway to citizenship, you can really rebuild your life. So they're just a couple of the examples. Obviously, there's the advocacy work that we do as well, so that we don't have to keep raising money to be that ambulance at the bottom of the cliff when people need it, but that we can also change the policies so we're no longer needed as much. But it really, every dollar goes to funding the direct services. And because we started 22 years ago out of a school university project powered by volunteers, we still have thousands of volunteers who help us today. So it means that every dollar that's donated, we're really, really efficient in the money that then goes directly to services to people seeking asylum, because we have thousands of volunteers who help us. So whether it's education, language for people, employment, if you're lucky enough to have the right to work, whether it's weekly groceries, we do return to school packs for kids, we do nappies for newborn mums, we have a hot meal where we provide a hot meal to, but that's exactly where all the money goes to. And we could not do it. I think that the average donation to ASRC is about $20 or $50. And we're made up of thousands and thousands of $20 or $50 donations from households across Australia. And that's how we get our money to keep our doors open to provide services to 7,000 people. So, yeah, every dollar makes a difference in the lives of people seeking asylum, and for us to be able to keep our doors open.
And it sounds like the power of partnerships is incredibly important, given that especially you don't receive that federal funding.
Yeah, the power of partnerships is so important, whether it's businesses who are hiring people seeking asylum, whether it's getting our ASRC catering, whether it's partnerships and organisations that dollar match any donation that people give, or they donate goods to us. We have partnerships with businesses or with retailers who will give in-kind food, because of that $70,000 that we spend on groceries a month, we also get about, and another 30 or 40,000 in kind. So yeah, absolutely, partnerships are so crucial to us being able to provide services.
Now, if I can ask you both this question, Saaj, starting with you, what keeps you going? And also, one day, hopefully a long time in the future, when you look back on your life, what will you be most proud of?
Look, they say, there are two kinds of stress, negative and positive. And I mean, these policies and the situation for refugees here in this country, the treatment of refugees, their rights being stripped away and not for them not having to have the same rights as any other citizens here in Australia gives me that stress. But then it's that positive stress of, saving of people's lives, such as if a lion or a hunter is there to attack you, you just want to flee and escape to safety. So it is kind of that situation. You see all these policies coming from these top class, well-educated, well-informed, wealthy people who know all the standards of human rights, who know what the civilized world looks like. They're the policymakers as well, unfortunately. So these are all coming from these very well-aware people, and they are the ones who are imposing it on the most vulnerable, on the most weak, on the most unrecognized population of people who have come here for safety. So while looking into all this and seeing that on daily basis, starting from within my family to community and then to the broader population of people, not only here in Australia, but back home as well, like the whole channel just goes and goes. It drives you, it motivates you to do more. It creates this positive stress within me, this spark that, okay, there is a great need for this work to be done, and you do your part and you keep pushing. And as Jana said, it is a hard process. It's really hard to fight with the system in any country that you are in. It's really hard to find your place and have a say in politics or have a say in the change process of laws, particularly in a country like this. But also we see these little shifts and changes, such as Jana gave the example of reducing number of people on Nauru at the moment, such as we saw this big announcement for 19,000 people that they will be given permanent residency after being on temporary visa for so long, for 10 years or more. These are all the power of this kind of work. It is slow, but if you keep going, if you keep pushing, if you don't sit quiet, there can be a situation where you don't do anything. These are the laws, that's how they are, and just live with it. No, we say no to that. And we saw that change for granting permanency to these 19,000 people. There will be moments of pride, such as we celebrated ASRC's 22nd anniversary just last week. That made us proud. This video that you just played, a small stall. This work is like that. It grows over time. Only if you are committed, only if you need of raising your voice and doing the work more than ever. And I would encourage, anyone and everyone to do their part in this.
Saaj, we're losing you there. Jana, if we can. Thank you, Saaj. It was a little broken up, but we definitely heard the message. Jana, what keeps you going?
I mean, I get to work with wonderful people like Saaj every day. So that's one thing, is just the incredible individuals who I work with, who really, their passion. I mean, all of Saaj's words, she said to me as we sit next to each other in the office every day, and that really is what motivates me. I also have hope. I'm definitely a hopeful person, and I think that I think the more people who know exactly what is happening and what is happening in our name, in Australia's name, to individuals and how we're treating people will advocate for change. We saw the result of the last election, especially with the number of independents and Greens who were elected with a changing government, that it was absolutely a rejection of the politics of fear. We even saw on election day, the Morrison government set out a text message about, there might be voter rivals, and people rejected that. So I've seen enough change to have that hope. And whenever I'm feeling moments of despair or like this is all too hard or I want to give up, and I do have those often, I just remind myself that policies don't happen by themselves. There are individuals who are actively putting these policies in place, and they're trying to wear us down, and they want a cruel system. So I think as soon as I give up, that's them winning, and I'm a very stubborn and determined person. So I think we've got to keep on going, because we can say government, we can say policies, but there are actually individuals behind that. There are individuals who are deciding, who are signing off on these policy every day, and we have to hold them to account. So as long as I have the opportunity to have that platform and work for an incredible organisation with amazing colleagues such as Saaj, I'll keep doing it.
So well said. Thank you, both of you. That's really such a, sadly too short, but an incredible and moving investigation into both the work of the ASRC and the broader issues. So at I Could Change, we're effectively bridging worlds between the business community and the NGO sector, helping fund the extraordinary work, for example, that you do at ASRC. So for any businesses that want to get involved and give back from every sale and support the ASRC, then please join us, come on board. We actually have a winter special where we've made it even simpler and reduce the fee, the small fee that we charge in order to do what we do. 100% of donations that are raised go through to our NGOs, so they would go through to the ASRC. So join us if you can. For those who are already supporting and giving back, thank you for your incredible commitment to creating change amongst the community, amongst the environment at this really crucial time. We have a few minutes for any questions. If there's anyone who is listening today who would like to ask anything of our guests. From Adam, I'm really shocked to learn there are so many outstanding asylum seeker claims and how uncaring and unjust the entire policy seems to be. If you were PM for a day, I feel a great question coming on. What is the most important thing that needs to change? Who would like to answer this?
Oh, I'm happy to jump in quickly. I mean, okay, the important thing that needs to change, I think there are two sides of it. One is that the narrative absolutely needs to change. Like the reason politicians say that they treat people seeking asylum so terribly is because of the demonization. We see it in the media. We rarely see stories of the resilience of refugees. So I think that for long-term change, we have to get the narrative right. Like we even say people seeking asylum, so it's a reminder that this is about people. So I think that getting the narrative right, like the PM needs to be talking about it. If I was PM for a day, I'd be talking about it just to make sure refugees being treated fairly was an absolute priority. And then the most important thing that needs to change is just an acknowledgement that, refugees have sought safety in Australia. They are our responsibility. We have a duty of care to them. So the most important thing to change would just be the laws and policies that are denying them the rights, whether we sent them to Nauru or Papua New Guinea, whether we deny them having the right to work, whether we don't allow them to have access to Medicare, whether it takes 10 years to process their claims. So I think probably the one thing then is the important thing that needs to change is that treating refugees fairly needs to become a priority, because we know a lot of people care about it, but they've got 20 other things they care about as well. The Prime Minister, if I was Prime Minister for that one day, I would make sure that refugees being treated fairly is a priority and that everyone knows about it.
Can I say one thing here?
Yes, please.
Quickly. If I was a PM for a day, I would make all these policymakers who are making policies for refugees to become refugees for that one day and be on those visas that they put people on and live their life in order to experience it firsthand by themselves, so that next day when they're back in the office, they understand what they're doing with people. And they start working on it.
Yes, I think this country needs both of you to be a PM for a day, one day after the other, and fix this issue once and for all. But it's such a good point to have the lived experience is what changes us. We need to feel emotionally to understand what it is to go through what you have. Thank you so much. Great question. Any others from Chris? What are some of the biggest challenges faced by refugees and asylum seekers in accessing essential support and services? So perhaps go on, Jana, if you'd like to answer that.
Saajeda's lived through this, so I can speak to it. But from a systemic change point of view, it's the system is stacked against them. Like how you're treated depends on when you arrived, how you arrived, what stage you're at in the process. And so it's really the biggest challenge is just basic rights on a visa. For example, most visas are only valid for 3 or 6 months. So if you're lucky enough to have the right to work, no employer is going to hire you because you've got such a short-term visa. If you don't have the right to work, then you can't access Medicare. And the way that our social services system is structured is that if you're on that visa, you can't access any form of mainstream social support. So the biggest challenges about accessing it are just the entitlements on that visa because of the government's choices. But yes, Saaj, over to you. You've lived through this, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a really broad one as well. Very simple question, but a broad one. You name it, we have faced it. It's just like that. You run from one uncertainty to just face another one in a new country. That's how it starts. And then to navigate this uncertainty, to become certain about your life, you need to go through this very complicated process where you just lose everything, where you lose yourself, where you lose hope, where you lose vision, where you are totally confused on where to go, what to do, who are the right people to talk to, what is this legal system, what are these visa subclasses, and what do they mean for me? So it just engages you in such a complicated web of things that you feel stuck. And going through, so you have no choice but to hire, let's say, a lawyer or a migration agent, and you don't even have money for that. So you take some loan, you lend money from other people to pay these lawyers to make you understand what your situation is, who you are in this country, and what your rights are and what are not, starting from there. So you have to keep paying money to someone else in order to make you understand what the system is, where you have run into, and what does this safety mean, and how much it is going to cost you. So it is really, really complicated when you first arrive in the country. It takes you years and years and years to understand your position as an individual, because you are all these visa subclasses, these policies, these entitlements, refugee, bridging visa, subclass, 896 or whatever. So that's who you are. And you need to find yourself and navigate yourself as a human through all these webs that they have made for you. And it's so complicated because you have no idea of. It's not what you have made. It is made for you, but you got to function in that. So that's how we navigate it. And that's how, we survive and we come back to life in this country as a totally different person while we have explored all this, while losing a lot of energy, losing a lot of finances, and being, in the process stripped away from your own individual power and your own individual recognition. And then the other things we already mentioned, right to education, right to access to health services, right to work, and your freedom being stripped away from you, being away from your family. I mean, what can you name here? Everything, basically, everything.
Thank you, Saaj. It's extraordinary to hear that from you. And yeah, I think it's fair to say most Australians have no idea what that must be like. And this country is obviously wealthier with you in it. So thank you, ASRC, for doing what you do and for joining us here today. And I note that the 20th of June is World Refugee Day. It's a day both to celebrate, to commiserate, to come together, to really raise awareness about this growing global issue, and to reflect on the privilege that we have for many people in Australia, and also the great challenges that many people still face looking to migrate and have their legal rights recognised in this country. So at Equal Change, we're very proud to support your work, and we want to accelerate the impact that we can have on your projects on the ground, from supplying groceries to legal aid to helping people navigate the system. Thank you both so much for joining us today, and we hope this conversation today also helps us create further impact for the incredible work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jana. Thanks, Saaj.